Welcome back. Today's video is about labels, which is always a hot topic in the music industry. Let's start with a very basic question. Why is it called a label? Well, a record label is literally the label in the center of a gramophone record. So next to stating the artist name and the name of the album, it also mentions the record company with its logo, which is making the word label a synonym for record company. In the video about the overview on the music industry, we saw that everything started with live music, played in front of the more wealthy people, then moved on to selling music on paper. The next step would be publishing, which made it possible to have, one piece of music played in more venues at the same time, but were played by different musicians. And then the next step was recording. When the gramophone entered the music industry, the industry rapidly changed because the music of one artist could be listened to everywhere at the same time by the same artist. The recording industry was born. When the gramophone made its entry in the late 17th century, recorded music became widely available and was already a $100 million industry in the early 1920s. Then in the 1930s, a new medium came, the radio. It was free and sounded better than the gramophone, which diminished the interest in the product. Then in 1948, Columbia Records introduced the LP, which made it possible to have multiple songs on one final record. For most of the 20th century, this was the main music recording format. When genres like blues, rock and roll, and country music were introduced in the 50s, the album sales boomed. Because so many records were produced and offered to the public, the labels became not only quality brands, but also genre-oriented. But in the late 50s, a new technology would change the industry again. The magnetic tape was introduced.
This product was smaller, much more portable. So on the first hand, people could bring their music with themselves to their cars to listen to. And then later, Sony came up with the idea of the Walkman, which changed everything, as people could walk around the street with headphones and listen to cassettes.
Around the same time, MTV launched, giving record labels much more possibilities to market their music. It wasn't just about the song anymore, but the ability to offer a whole artistic package. In the 80s, the digital era made its entry, and in 1982, Philips introduced the CD, and profits peaked during the last 2 decades of the 20th century. In the 1990s, the internet became widely available, and software such as Napster opened the door to a new era of piracy. More and more people signed up, with the result that CD sales dropped drastically. Piracy was not accepted by the recording industry, who engaged in long and costly legal battles to combat it. But the damage already had been done. Sharing music over the internet became the new standard. At the beginning of the century, it was the iPod and other MP3 players that caused a huge increase in paid downloads. Music streaming had just started around the same time. Then, in 2011, the Swedish company Spotify succeeded in licensing an extensive music library. Where previously listeners, they bought and owned the songs of the albums, now they paid for a monthly subscription or listened to advertisements. They received a huge library of music in return. This resulted again in a huge, demand for services. These services are now responsible for most of the profits of the labels. Now that we have a broad understanding of the history of the recording industry, the question arises, what does a label do nowadays? So we asked a professional to explain which steps have to be taken to grow an artist's career at a label.
I think we can say every label starts with the scouting procedure, where you have a staff of people who are familiar with exact genres, exact scenes, and they understand quality of music and what people really want to listen to. And these people are constantly looking for talent, and they're approaching them, trying to sign them. And we call them A&R managers.
Step number 2 is signing. So once the talent is interested in joining the label, contract negotiations begin. This is done by the legal department. Once the contract is signed, it is time to work on the musical vision. The development of the artist's repertoire and musical vision is managed by the A&R manager. He will connect demo recordings and whatever more that needs to be done to get the right songs in place.
When the musical vision is there, the next step is to make the product and develop the marketing strategy. Again, the A&R manager is working together with the marketing manager and the product manager. And the product manager is the one who guides the production process and ensures that all the planning processes are adhered to. The task of the marketing manager is to find the right PR partners to work with and to get the music on the radio, TV, written press, online outlets, and important playlists.
So the product is ready, the marketing plan is in place, and a release date has been set. It's now time for the music to find its way to the fans. You can do this through physical distribution or through digital distribution. Physical distribution means distribution of a CD or LP or even cassette to a store where you can buy it. For this, you need a physical distribution company who ships the product to the stores. However, nowadays, most of the music listening is happening digitally. So this means that the music is going through a digital distributor who are also called aggregators. So instead of shipping CDs to a physical store, the aggregators make sure that all the music is delivered to platforms like Spotify or Deezer or Apple Music, where you can listen to it directly.
Obviously, not all the labels have the same size. There are huge labels with lots of employees, but there are also labels with only one or two. So it can be that in a small label, the A&R manager is scouting, signing, and manages the product release in one job. And there are also labels who have an A&R department, a legal department, and a product department. So therefore, let me introduce you to the three types of labels. Major labels, you have independent labels, also called indie labels, and DIY labels. Let's start with the biggest, the so-called major labels. According to the Association of Independent Music, in short AIM, a major label is a multinational company which has more than 5% of the world market for the sale of records or music videos. Since 2012, only 3 labels can be referred to as major labels. These are Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and Warner Music Group. The Association of Independent Music estimates that the majors have a 65 to 70% of collective global market share. To put it simple, major labels own a worldwide chain of all necessary parts of the market and have millions of dollars to back up their artists. If needed, they have the fundings to push an artist on a global level and can completely rely on their own distribution, marketing, and publishing network. This doesn't mean that this is always the case. If, for example, a big artist like Lady Gaga is releasing a new album through Universal Music in the United States, all Universal offices around the globe will have to work on this to make it as successful as possible in every country in the world. But if Universal France is signing a successful French artist, it doesn't mean that Universal Japan will also have to work on it. So it really depends on the chosen strategy for the artist. The labels that operate without the funding of the major music labels are considered as indie labels or independent labels. Where major labels work on a global level using their own network, indie labels work together with other smaller companies. These partnerships can be long-term or short-term in all parts of the world and also in all parts of the industry.
The biggest differences between a major label and an indie label, well, that's basically the money involved. Major labels usually have a catalog dating back from many, many decades, generating income from a back catalog like artists like Madonna, the Beatles, Rolling Stones. And that money can be used to be invested in new talent, new artists, developments of new artists. It's also used to maintain a much bigger operation than the indies can have. On the other hand, indie labels have a smaller structure, and this smaller structure enables them to be much more flexible and react much quicker whenever it comes to decisions in regarding the development of an artist and a career. That's, according to my experience, the biggest differences.
DIY stands for do it yourself, and that means that the artist and/or the manager starts a label and carries out all the aforementioned activities himself. They often hire third parties to handle the distribution, the artwork, promotion, etc. Especially if they want to serve several countries, hiring third parties is often inevitable. Okay, well, that is it as far as the label is concerned. Thank you for watching, and please make sure you watch the other videos available.